Should it rhyme with fricasee or kamikaze? It doesn't actually matter. It's know what you know and show it. Let's figure this out. All right, so nothing works in the world unless people trying to do stuff actually feel okay. And in order to feel okay in the world, you need autonomy, belonging, and competence. You need a sense that you are the driver of the car of your destiny, at least to some extent. You need a sense that you belong, at least to some extent. You need a sense that you can do stuff and be successful, at least to some extent. If you don't have any of those things, none of this other stuff I'm going to tell you is going to do much. So talk to somebody about that if you need to. All right, so while many other things are happening along the way, the journey from kindergartner to upper schooler is basically a journey from passive to active. When you're a kindergartner, things just come at you. Maybe they stick, maybe they don't. When you're a senior in high school, some things will come at you, some things will be hidden. It's your responsibility to figure out what it is you need, how you're going to get it, and how you're going to keep it, and how then you're going to show that you got it and kept it. An active learner is all about doing that. So how do we become active learners in middle school? Well, one thing you need to know is that a passive learner is not that this is, I don't judge this, it's honestly come by. Like it's a reasonable assumption that a test is what you're supposed to know, but it's not. A test is hopefully the most important things you're supposed to know, but it's really just a sample. It's just a sample of your learning. It would be inefficient and basically impossible to be in class for a month or 3 weeks or 2 weeks and then take a test in 45 minutes and have everything you're supposed to have learned on it. The test would need to take nearly as long as the rest of the class did. So it's just a sample, but that doesn't mean that's all you're supposed to learn. You should actually learn everything that you can. You should emphasize key material, but you really shouldn't exclude the rest. Don't just try to learn the sample that's going to be on the test. I respect why people need to do that, but someone needs to say, actually, that's not the goal here. All right. So let's talk about studying. Most people study by reading, looking at words, watching videos, listening to the teacher, doing something relatively passive, and then thinking. Do I know it? I think I know it. I think I get it. Yeah, let me take that test. And then they just hope. So you walk into the test hoping everything's going to be okay. So instead of reading and thinking, just reading and thinking, why not try read, write, speak, and interact? Read, write, speak, and interact every time you're studying for something you want to do well in. Not something you just want to do well in, but something you actually want to learn well. So read, write, speak, and interact. And you might notice, repeat. So reading isn't what a lot of people think it is. Reading isn't starting at the beginning, reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and going in a straight line from beginning to end, and then you're done reading. I looked at all the words, therefore I read. That is not a good model for what reading means. Reading means actually looking at all the words and doing whatever you need to do to understand what they mean and to remember what they mean and be able to apply that information to other things in your world. In order to do that, you can't just read straight through. You probably have to loop back. You have to sift for what's most important, even though you don't want to leave out less important things just because they're less important. You want to make connections. And one of my favorite ones is rereading if you space. I'm often reading along, and I suddenly go, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about lunch, and I have no idea what I just read. Well, when I'm reading for fun, sometimes I just continue. And if I can continue and it makes sense, I'm happy. But when I'm reading for school, I have to be disciplined about that, and I have to go back to where I actually stopped paying attention and reread. It's really important. You might miss very important things. So that's reading. That's reading actively, not passively. Writing is a good way to make your thinking active rather than passive. There are lots of things you can write, and I can actually go more into detail on each of these if you want, but meta notes are a big deal. It's important for me to write down more things than I actually need in order to have notes that make sense. I have to write, hey, we're studying George Washington, even though I know a lot about George Washington. And then I'll write down things that are details that have helped me remember what we talked about. Even though I may already know a lot of that material. Well, when I take meta notes, I'm removing just the parts that I really need to study because it's new. And that's an active way of looking at my notes, taking meta notes, taking notes on my notes. If a teacher gives you interactive study guides, don't just read them. Actually interact with them, write on them, look up things from them, do active things to take that in. The closer you can do a facsimile of what you're really going to do on the test, the more you know how well you will do on the test. So if you know you're going to have to write an essay for the test, write an essay. If you know you're going to have to do short answers or paragraphs, write short answers, write paragraphs. It will vastly improve your performance on the test. I know to me that sounded crazy, like that sounded like so much work. But once you make it a normal part of your practice, sort of like writing all your work in math, it's actually it's not that big a deal. You get used to it, and you start doing really well, and that's highly motivating. So after I've done my reading and I've done writing on my reading, in order to make sure I remember it, is I start doing it out loud. I speak. And a simple way to look at the speak part is I recite it from memory, and I do it cumulatively. And so obviously, if I don't remember something, I don't go, oh well. I actually do look back at the stuff I've read and the stuff I've written. But the goal is to eventually be able to recite the whole thing from memory. And the thing about being cumulative is if A, so I start with one item, A, and then the second time I say A and also B, and then the third time I state 3 facts, including the first 2, and the fourth time I recite 4 things, including the first 3. This is what makes it cumulative. Now by that time I've done the first one 4 times, it's probably pretty well installed, so I actually start leaving it out. I add a fact E, but only repeat B, C, and D. So I'm always doing about 4 things. And after I've done each one 4 times, it drops off and I add a new one. This is very personal. I am not saying everyone needs to do this way, but this is a pretty good model for a lot of us for how to remember a bunch of information, how to really know that I know it. I can say it from memory. But it also is very important, that final step where you do repeat everything, starting at the first one, starting with A, and going as far as you went. And you're in and out of the process repeatedly. So the speak part of the process is mostly about making sure it's actually installed in memory and you can access it and you can describe it. Why am I a teacher? I'm a teacher because that's how you learn the best. I don't really know how to do anything as well as I know how to do it after I've taught someone else to do it. I've sort of mastered it in order to do that. I have to be able to look at it, I have to be able to do it, and I have to be able to explain it, and I have to be able to make someone else understand it. I've really mastered the material, and that, for me, comes from interaction. So, 2 kinds of interaction. When I'm interacting with a peer, someone in my class, I might make a study group. And the cool thing about a study group is I can divide and conquer. Like, you do chapter 1, I'll do chapter 2, and she'll do chapter 3. But it's really important that you don't learn chapter 2 well and not learn chapter 1 and 3 well. So you need to have brutal question and answer exchanges with your group until everyone really knows the whole thing. Still, it's awesome to divide and conquer. It makes a huge amount of work seem much more manageable. Because honestly, it's kind of more fun to talk about it, to learn by talking about it, than by simply doing the process of learning it all from the reading. Backwards. So, but sometimes I interact with a non-peer, and here's the interesting thing about that. It could be a parent or some other adult. And, someone not in the same class as me. And you have to train them. Because a lot of times the adult's like, oh, I know all about this. I will help so much. And the fact is they don't know the class you're taking, the teacher you're taking. They have some idea about the material, but you need to learn that material the way that you're going to get credit for in that course. So you have to convince them to play dumb, pretend they don't know about it. And then they need to listen to what you are saying about the topic and ask questions, as if they knew nothing about it, until they completely understand. And the favor they're doing you is until you can explain it and they can go, oh, I see, okay, I get it, I get all the details, and they can even say it back to you. If you don't get to that point, then you actually need to study more. You need to do more speaking and interacting, perhaps, or more reading and writing, whatever it takes. Okay, so there's a very specific way to make a study plan, and I actually make a list of all the things I have to read, a list of all the things I could write, perhaps which parts of those I'm going to speak, and make a plan, like a calendar plan of who I'm going to interact with, when and where, and how we're going to prepare for that. So that's what I would do now. All right, but that's a lot of work. There's just no way around the fact that that's a lot of work. So how do I keep up the momentum when all this work feels like torture? Endless torture and hard work. Hopefully you get some payoff. Hopefully the confidence you get, even pretty early on, and especially at the interactive stage when you get to start showing somebody, oh, I'm learning stuff, feels really good. One way to make it more manageable is the 50-50 rule. And so you get a timer. You put it far away. Each time you set it, you have to put it far away from you. So you're forced to get up and change modes when the alarm goes off, hopefully the loud alarm. So you time how long you are on task, and you also time how long you're off task. So the way it really works is I actually have to start with an honest, how much work am I willing to do? If I'm really dreading this task, maybe I'm only willing to work 5 minutes. Maybe I'm only willing to work a minute. Well, that's fine. Then I only get that much playtime. So this is why you have to time the playtime as well. You work for 5 minutes, you play for 5 minutes. You work for 5 minutes, you play for 5 minutes. You work for 5 minutes and you get into a flow, and suddenly you forgot about the time. And you've still earned that much playtime. It's a little dangerous. In an 8-hour day, you might only get 4 hours of work done. In my experience, before long, I hit some flow. I might hit some bumpy places in the road where I really want some playtime. But as long as I don't do play that is too distracting and it makes it so I can't even get back to work and I miss my alarm and I'm not disciplined about it, 4 hours of serious work in an 8-hour period, like on a Saturday, it's like night and day from what I used to do when I just procrastinated and felt bad all day and then had tons of work to do on Sunday night. So I think that might be it. Yeah, remember, these are the most important things. Who cares about any of the rest of this if you're not feeling okay in the world? And you need these 3 things to feel okay in the world. Talk to someone about it if you don't feel like this. You've got this stuff. And I can talk about how adults give themselves these things. When you're really little, you have to be given these things. The older you get, the more you have to give them to yourself. Sort of like moving from passive to active.